Good evening. So let's start with the today's class, the last class of the ECG, and the last topic, remaining last topic is the ventricle arrhythmias, or we can say ventricle origin tachyarrhythmias. So starting with the first one. So starting with ventricle tachyarrhythmia, again three columns table we can make: the name of the ventricle tachyarrhythmia, its description, and the ECG manifestations. So starting with the first one, and that is the number one ventricle tachyarrhythmia. Number one, it is ventricle tachycardia. It is ventricle tachycardia. Ventricle tachycardia. So ventricle tachycardia is the description. It is the presence of the definition of ventricle tachycardia more than equal to three consecutive ventricle ectopics at a rate of 100 to 250 per minute. More than equal to three consecutive, at least three consecutive ventricle ectopic should be there, and the rate will be 100 to 250 per minute. 100 to 250 per minute. Now, if you can recall back the basic three, in the basic three we have done the normal depolarization and abnormal depolarization. So here it is a abnormal depolarization, and for example it is originating from the epicardial surface. So this is just an example. Impulse is originating from the epicardial surface, so QRS complexes will be negative. So in this case, if we look at the ECG description of ventricle ectopics at a rate of more than 100 to at a rate of 100 to 250. So this is characterized by a wide QRS complex. This is mandatory. For the ventricle tachycardia. The origin is below bundle of His. Below the bundle of His. So if the origin is below bundle of His, there will be a wide QRS complex, and the heart rate here will be 100 to 250. Heart rate will be 100 to 250. So if we understand this diagram, and this diagram is the example if the ectopic is ventricle ectopic is epicardial side. This is just for an example. The ventricle ectopic is at the epicardial side, so the QRS complex will be negative. That we have already done earlier, and the relation between the QRS and T will become opposite. So the usually the T wave will be opposite to QRS. So in this case, QRS and T opposite direction. But to make a diagnosis of a ventricle tachycardia, we need only two things. One is a wide QRS complex and heart rate of 100 to 250. This is what is needed to make a diagnosis, of the ventricle tachycardia. So first understand the meaning of the ventricle tachycardia. Meaning of the ventricle tachycardia is at least 3 consecutive ventricle ectopics. Consecutive rate of firing is 100 to 250, and this is an example where the ectopic is located at the epicardial side. So the depolarization will go away from the chest leads, so we will see the QRS complex which are negative, and T wave will be in opposite direction, so there will be the QRS complex. If look at the diagram, the QRS complex are negative and they are wide, QRS complexes. And the heart rate, if we calculate the heart rate, distance between 2 consecutive QRS complexes, so here the distance is approximately, so we will see this is RR interval. This is the RR interval. So the rate here is heart rate is equal to 1500 divided by, and it is 8. 1500 divided by 8. So it will come out to be approximately I think 175. 175 approximately. So this defines the ventricle tachycardia. Now come to the second abnormality of the ventricle origin. Second abnormality of P wave. Very good question. Where is the P wave? Remember, P wave will be hidden by either QRS or T wave. Either QRS or T wave will hide the P wave. So in this condition, they are coming so fast that P is hidden by either QRS or T wave, because they are coming so fast. So P wave will be absent usually in these conditions, in a ventricle tachycardia. So this is the first arrhythmia, ventricle tachycardia. Now coming to the second arrhythmia, why QRS is wide? QRS is wide because the impulse or ectopic is below bundle of His. So that ectopic will depolarize one ventricle followed by the other. So this will make the QRS wide. Now come to the second arrhythmia. So the second arrhythmia is ventricle flutter. It is ventricle flutter. Where is the T wave in the diagram? The T wave in the diagram you can see very well. It is clear cut. So look at the tracing. This is a QRS complex. This is QRS, and the T wave. So this is T wave. This is the T wave. So you can identify from the diagram. QRS in this condition is negative and the T wave is upright. So the things should correlate. What about the atrial rate? Remember, you can't calculate the atrial rate here because P wave will be hidden by QRS or T. So when there is no P wave which is visible, you can't identify, you can't calculate the atrial rate. You can't calculate the atrial rate. So this is coming so fast. The cause and the treatment we will do in journal of all the these ventricular arrhythmia. They are common causes and common treatment. So that we will make a flow chart later on. So come to the ventricle flutter. So next arrhythmia is ventricle flutter. So the ventricle flutter is, so what is the difference between a third degree AV block and ventricle tachycardia? Very easy. Third degree AV block was a slow heart rate. P waves were seen in that, while ventricle tachycardia is a fast heart rate, and usually P wave are not seen here. Now which lead to C? So it is seen in, if it is a limb lead, then lead 2, and if it is a chest lead, so any chest lead which is given, usually V5 and V6, you should see this. Now ventricle flutter. Ventricle flutter means there is a synchronized ventricle depolarization by ventricle ectopics So there is a synchronized ventricle depolarization. Synchronized ventricle depolarization. We can apply ECG nomenclature in ventricle tachycardia. Yes, we can apply. We can apply here. Now, more than 3 consecutive ectopic means, for definition, 3 consecutive. Consecutive means लगातार. Now, come to the ventricle flutter. Synchronized ventricle depolarization by ventricle ectopics at a rate of more than 250 per minute. More than 250 per minute. So this is the description of ventricle flutter. Synchronized ventricle depolarization. Synchronized ventricle depolarization by ventricle ectopics at a rate of more than 250 per minute. 250 per minute. So this is characterized by the same finding. The QRS will be wide, but the heart rate will be here more than 250. Heart rate here will be more than 250. So the heart rate is the only differentiating feature between a ventricle tachycardia and a ventricle flutter. And sometimes ventricle flutter is so fast that you are not able to differentiate between the QRS complexes and the T wave. So they come so fast that it is sometimes very difficult to differentiate the T wave and the QRS complexes. So if we see the tracing of the QRS complexes here, so this is the tracing here, which is very difficult to differentiate ki where the T wave is ending and where is the QRS coming. So for you, I am making the QRS complex like this. This is a wide QRS complex, and this is a T wave. This is a T wave. So this is the tracing of ventricle flutter. Ventricle flutter. So here, yeah, in this example also the ectopic is originating from epicardium. Ectopic is originating from the epicardium, correct. So this is the ventricle flutter. And if I can see the rate here, the distance between two QRS complexes is 5 mm. Distance between two QRS complexes is 5 mm. So in this example, it is 1500 divided by 5 heart rate. So it will come out to be 300. It will come out to be 300. So this is a ventricle flutter. Ventricle flutter. Now coming to the number third arrhythmia, and number third arrhythmia is ventricle fibrillation. It is ventricle fibrillation. So the ventricle fibrillation, just like the word atrial fibrillation, which we have done, where the atrial depolarization were asynchronized, same word will be there. It is a asynchronized ventricle depolarization by random multifocal ectopics. So it is a asynchronized. In ventricle origin, should it be always epicardium? No, it can be endocardium also. It can also be the endocardium. In that case, QRS will be positive. Now coming to the ventricle fibrillation, it is a asynchronized ventricle depolarization like this. All the fiber, if they depolarize at the same time, this is synchronized, and asynchronized means each fiber is depolarizing independent of each other like this. This is the fibrillation. This is a synchronized contraction. So because of this asynchronized ventricle depolarization, so what will happen? There will be no definitive QRS complex. No definitive QRS complex. Why QRS is wide? If it is a synchronized contraction of individual ventricles, and here it is the asynchronized contraction of different fibers, so there is no definitive QRS complexes. So the ECG will be a very randomly coming electrical activities. So there will be no discrete QRS complex here. And this ECG means the ventricle is not effectively contracting. There is no effective ventricle contraction here. There is no effective ventricle contraction here. So this will produce a zero cardiac output. So this is the ECG of ventricle fibrillation, which if you see in any patient, immediately you have to give the DC shock. Because this is a very dangerous arrhythmia. Cardiac output is zero here. No effective ventricle contractions. So you can't calculate the heart rate here. So heart rate can't be calculated. Heart rate can't be calculated here. So this is ventricle fibrillation. Ventricle fibrillation. So these are the three important ventricle arrhythmias. Three important ventricle arrhythmias. So let's see what is the cause of these ventricle arrhythmia and what is the treatment of these ventricle arrhythmias. So come to the cause. The cause of ventricle tachyarrhythmias is the increased excitability of ventricle fibers. So there is increased excitability of ventricle fibers. And how this excitability is increased? This increased excitability is because of, let me check your physiology knowledge. Let me check your physiology knowledge. This increased excitability of the ventricle fiber occur if resting membrane potential becomes all of you must be knowing a resting membrane potential. All of you must be knowing a resting membrane potential. So my question to you is, this is RMP. This is minus 90 millivolts. So when will the excitability of the fibers, when the resting membrane potential become, all right, very good, very good, it becomes less negative. Very nice. So it become less negative. So the firing will start very rapidly. So this resting membrane potential become less negative. There are two reasons, important reasons for that. And those reasons are the etiology. And those etiologies are the ischemia or infarction, and hyperkalemia. Two important conditions. Hyperkalemia. So these two conditions predispose to the ventricle arrhythmia, and that will be the clinical history given to you. A patient of myocardial infarction, patient of angina, or a patient of chronic kidney disease with hyperkalemia. So they predispose to these arrhythmias. These predispose to the ventricle arrhythmias. Now come to the treatment of this ventricle arrhythmia. This in journal is almost same. Yes, digoxin can also be one of the cause, but that rarely causes. That is a rare side effect of digoxin. Very good. That is a rare side effect of the digoxin. Now, coming to the treatment of ventricle tachyarrhythmias. So, treatment of ventricle. There are three ventricle arrhythmia we have seen: ventricle tachycardia, ventricle flutter, and ventricle fibrillation. Ventricle fibrillation. So these are the three important ventricle origin. These are the three important ventricle origin. So the ventricle tachycardia is further divided into, according to the duration. If the duration of the ventricle tachycardia is less than 30 seconds, if the ventricle tachycardia, in the recording we have seen that it lasted for less than 30 seconds, This is known as non-sustained ventricle tachycardia. This is known as the non-sustained ventricle tachycardia. Non-sustained ventricle tachycardia. So, or if the duration is more than 30 seconds. This is known as sustained ventricle tachycardia. This is known as the sustained ventricle tachycardia. So the treatment of this condition, treatment of the ventricle which tachycardia which is non-sustained, we will give prophylaxis. So oral prophylaxis is given so that it should not recur, and that is amedron. That is amedron. While if it is more than 30 seconds, that is a sustained tachycardia. Then this condition, flutter condition and fibrillation, all these are, as a rule, they are always hemodynamically unstable. They are always hemodynamically unstable. So therefore the next line of treatment, so next treatment is equal to treatment of choice equal to immediate step. So such type of questions will be asked to you. What will you do next if the patient is presenting with these ventricle arrhythmias? Next treatment, next step, treatment of choice, immediate step is always a DC shock. And we start with the DC shock here is given as 200 joules. 200 joules will be given. But remember, a DC shock is a temporary method. It is a temporary method. So the arrhythmia can come back again anytime. So we want to suppress the ventricle fibers. So we will start simultaneously drug of choice. Simultaneously, and now this drug of choice is IV amedron, and it has preferred nowadays over IV lignocaine. IV lignocaine. So this is the treatment of the ventricle origin of tachyarrhythmias. Ventricle origin of tachyarrhythmias. After exercise, remember, after exercise it is a sinus tachycardia, not a ventricle tachycardia. So we have done the tachyarrhythmias. Yesterday we did a supraventricular tachyarrhythmia. Now we have done the ventricle origin of tachyarrhythmias. Now for your exam point of view, how to make a correct diagnosis of all these ventricle origin of all these tachyarrhythmias, supraventricular and ventricle. So we will make a flow chart. The flow chart will be same as we have done for the bradyarrhythmia cases. It is exactly same. So let's try to make the diagnosis of these both supraventricular and ventricle origin. So starting with the three simple steps to diagnose the tachyarrhythmia, that is summary. Summary. So, the first step, if you can recall back, the first step was QRS complex. So, whenever ECG is given to you, remember, focus on mainly lead 2. This is your main focus, lead 2. Focus on lead 2. Now, the first step is QRS complex. First step is the QRS complex. So QRS complex can be normal or wide. So two results will be there. Normal width. It is a normal width, also known as narrow QRS. That is synonym. Or it can be a wide QRS. Wide means more than equal to 3 mm. More than equal to 3 mm. So here, if it is a normal or a narrow QRS complex without any exception, our diagnosis is, it is always, without any exception, it will always be a supraventricle. It is always a supraventricle, because ventricle can't be a normal complex. Ventricle are always wide QRS complex. So if it is wide, our diagnosis is ventricle origin. Ventricle origin. Now the ventricle origin, then what you have to see, if QRS complexes you are able to see, there will be two diagnoses. Either it is a ventricle tachycardia or ventricle flutter. And how to differentiate these two? Only difference is heart rate. Is the heart rate. So here the heart rate will be the defining point. So when it is a ventricle origin, look at heart rate. If heart rate is 100 to 250, call it as ventricle tachycardia. Ventricle tachycardia. If it is more than 250, call it as ventricle flutter. Call it as ventricle flutter. Reason for wide QRS. So this has been discussed many times, the reason of wide QRS in a ventricle origin. Now come to the normal QRS. So the next step number 1 was QRS complex. We have to see the width. Now the second step is P wave. If you can recall back, bradyarrhythmia, we have done the same steps. So now what you have to do, you have to assess the P wave. So P wave can be present or absent. There are two results. There are two results. If it is absent, P wave is absent, and it is a case of fast heart rate, it is a case of tachyarrhythmia. So think of two diagnoses. Either it could be atrial fibrillation or it could be PSVT. These are the only two conditions. These are the two conditions where the P wave will be absent, but QRS should be normal. QRS should be present. QRS is normal, narrow complex. So in that case, if the P wave is absent, you think of two diagnoses. Diagnosis will be either atrial fibrillation or PSVT. PSVT. And how to differentiate these two? Very simple point. Simple point is the atrial fibrillation heart rate is irregular. Heart rate is irregular, and PSVT heart rate is regular. Heart rate is regular. Now, if P wave is present, we come to the final step, step number 3. So there are only 3 steps. So if P wave is present, we will assess each P followed by QRS. Each P is followed by QRS. So the P wave, remember, can be a normal P wave or abnormal P wave. Here P wave is present, can be a normal or can be abnormal. So there will be 2 answers for this question. That is the last step in a diagnosis of the tachyarrhythmia. So question answer will be no, each P is not followed by QRS. Each P is not followed by QRS. Answer is no. So the diagnosis here will be atrial flutter. Diagnosis is atrial flutter. Not every P wave. Though P wave will be abnormal, P wave will be pointed, P wave will be inverted in atrial flutter. While if our answer is yes, each P is followed by QRS. So there will be 2 diagnoses. Either it will be a sinus tachycardia or atrial tachycardia. Or atrial tachycardia. So the differentiation between these two sometime can be difficult. If atrial tachycardia origin is near the SA node, then you can't differentiate on the ECG. But if it is not near the SA node, the differentiating point here will be in sinus tachycardia, P wave is normal, and in atrial tachycardia, P wave will be abnormal. P wave will be abnormal. So these are the 3 steps. So keep revising these steps and you will come to a correct diagnosis. You will come to a correct diagnosis. And again repeating, examiner examiner will not give you the complicated arrhythmias. They will give you simple ones. They will give you a simple one, tachyarrhythmia or bradyarrhythmia. Now, before finishing with the arrhythmia section, let me check your knowledge with the figure I will draw, and you will draw the diagram. Let me see how many of you can draw the diagram. So this you do on your own, and then we will cross check. We will cross check. So this is the feature, that is, if ventricle ectopics are originating from more than equal to 3 different sites. Three different sites. If this is the condition, ventricle ectopics are originating from 3 different sites. So there will be at least 3 different morphologies of the QRS. three different morphologies of the QRS. So the this is endocardial side, and this is epicardial side. This is a transverse section of the ventricle that I have taken. So you have to draw the ECG of this condition. ECG of this condition, I will take multiple sites of depolarization. So the multiple sites of depolarization, suppose this is the chest wall here. It is originating from here. Number one, the depolarization will be like this. So number two, site change. Number one. Number two, and again number three. Depolarization. So there are three. I have taken the example of three. So these are the cycles which are there. So now for these cycles, try to draw your QRS complex, and then we will cross check it. Ki what will be your QRS complexes? One thing is clear, QRS complexes, all these three QRS complexes will be different in morphology because the ectopic is changing its sites. So there will be, yes, it will be some will be less, some will be more negative, some will be less negative. So the number one will be more negative. So I will draw the number one, QRS complex. Number one QRS complex. Now number two QRS complex will be shorter, and number three will be even shorter. Yes, first will be maximum negative, and the last one will be very very less negative. So the QRS complexes are changed. Now if now listen to the statement very carefully. Example, this is just for an example. These three sites are generating the ectopic. Only these three sites are generating the ectopic one by one. For example, the number fourth cycle isn't third positive. Third will be yes. I have just make it slightly upward. So the net result will be a very very less QRS complex. Yes, you are correct that third should supposed to be a positive QRS complex, but I will make it slightly downward. Now the fourth cycle is because of the number third site. So the number fourth will be same QRS complex. Now the fifth cycle is due to second site. Fifth is due to second site, so it will be resembling number 2. And sixth is originating from number 1 site. Sixth is originating from the number 1 site. Number 1 site. What if 3 is exactly in the center? Then it will be biphasic. Net result will be 0. Net result will be 0. So it depends on where is the number third. Net depolarization vector is generating. Net depolarization. Yes, T wave dimension will be dependent on QRS. Yes, yes. So now visualize. This is the 3 points which are responsible for. This is just for example. 3 points responsible for ventricle ectopics. They are oscillating around a point. Oscillating around a point. And this is the ventricle ectopics are oscillating around a point. Oscillating means torsades around D. Point means pointis. So this is torsades D pointis. This is torsades D pointis. Responsible for the polymorphic ventricle tachyarrhythmias. And this torsades D pointis is usually precipitated by prolonged QT interval. It is precipitated by prolonged QT interval. Yes, twisting around a point. Twisting around a point. So this is known as torsades D pointis. The ectopics are oscillating around a point, responsible for different QRS morphology in a pattern. And how does the diagram of this look like? The diagram of this will be here. This is the typical example of torsades D pointis. Twisting, oscillation around a point, and the rate can be a tachycardia rate or a flutter rate. Remember, rate does not determine the torsades D pointis. It is a pattern of the QRS which determine the torsades D pointis. Rate can be of tachycardia, rate can be of flutter, ventricle flutter. Why it is precipitated? Due to the prolonged QT, because prolonged QT means more repolarization time. That means refractory period will be relative refractory period. And when the refractoriness reduces, the ventricle can generate their own ectopics. When there is a relative refractoriness which is there, so ventricle ectopics can be generated, leading to these ventricle arrhythmias. Now, we are why 4 correspond to 3? This is just the pattern of the ectopic. This is just the pattern of the ectopic, that they are oscillating around a point, responsible for torsades D pointis. Now, so we are now done with the arrhythmia section. We are done with the ECG section. And in the ECG section, there is one important aspect they do ask the myocardial infarction in the ECG, ki which is the site of the heart which is involved in the MI. So that will complete our ECG section. So now we come to the vascular disease of the heart. Vascular disease of the heart. So as in your schedule, ECG, hypertension, and MI was put. So let's start with the topic, that is systemic hypertension. Come to the topic of systemic hypertension. Electrolyte imbalance will be done later on once we finish with the cardiovascular cause. So that will be done in the electrolyte imbalance. So starting with the systemic hypertension. Systemic hypertension, first is the definitions. So first come to the definitions. According to AHA guidelines, according to the AHA guidelines. So the AHA guidelines of hypertension, of the hypertension. Bigeminy will be discussed during your classes like pulse. We have a bigeminy, so that will be discussed there. Now, coming to the systemic hypertension, according to the AHA guidelines, the classification is done according to the systolic BP and diastolic BP. And diastolic BP. So the according to this classification, systolic BP, diastolic BP, if the systolic BP is less than 120 and diastolic BP is less than 80, so this is a normal blood pressure. This is a normal blood pressure. First classification. Both criteria should be fulfilled, less than 120 and less than 80. We will solve the questions of ECG when we are done with the MI, because ECG question also include the myocardial infarction questions. So we will summarize whole of these ECG questions. So I have kept in the folder, you can see the ECG questions are there. So no problem, we will do those questions. And also I will give you some time to revise these notes again, so that you will be able to solve those questions easily. Now come to the number 2 classification. Number 2 classification is elevated blood pressure, elevated. So elevated BP, the systolic BP is between 120 to 129 and diastolic is less than 80. So number 3rd, stage 1 hypertension. Stage 1. So stage 1 hypertension is systolic BP of 130 to 139 or diastolic BP of 80 to 89. This is a stage 1 hypertension. Stage 2 hypertension, number 4. Stage 2 hypertension. So stage 2 hypertension, the systolic BP is more than equal to 140 or diastolic BP of more than 90. So this is the classification, American Heart Association classification of the blood pressure depending on the systolic BP and diastolic BP, and there are many changes in contrast to GNC guidelines. So Joint National Committee guidelines, now they are old. The new guidelines will be AHA. So first change is this classification of the blood pressure. The second one is the how many readings are needed to make a diagnosis of hypertension or elevated BP. So those guidelines have also changed. Yes, for all the ages. For all the ages. Now, yes, elevated BP is the same as pre-hypertension. Yes, elevated BP, it can be synonym with the pre-hypertension. So for diagnosing a patient as a new patient coming to you, you should need at least more than equal to 2 readings on more than equal to 2 different occasions. Are needed for making a diagnosis of abnormal blood pressure. So more than equal to 2 readings, more than equal to 2 readings on more than equal to 2 different occasions, 2 different occasions. Now understand this clinically, because hypertension cases are very high in number. Almost every third or fourth patient in medicine OPD will be having a high blood pressure. So what you have to do, if a patient is coming to you for the first time, what you need to do, you check the blood pressure. Suppose today you check the blood pressure, then you take another reading today. Maybe after 5 minutes or 10 minutes you can take the reading again. Now call the same patient tomorrow or maybe next week. So that will be second occasion, and on that second occasion take 2 readings. Take 2 readings. So that means at least 4 readings are needed to make a diagnosis. To make a diagnosis, 2 readings each on 2 different occasions. On 2 different occasions, that will make a diagnosis of the hypertension. Earlier it used to be 3 readings, now it is 4 readings. Now it is 4 readings. So these are the changes which are different from what you have done earlier. Now coming to what are the causes of blood pressure. So first is the definition. Now come to the causes. So the causes are classified into 2 groups. The most common cause is number 1 is primary, also equal to essential hypertension. Cause number 1 is a primary or a essential hypertension. What does this mean? This means that there is no identifiable cause. There is no identifiable cause of hypertension, of the hypertension. Indeed, this is the most common cause of the hypertension. Essential, no identifiable cause. Number 2 group is secondary hypertension. Number 2 group is secondary hypertension, and secondary hypertension means there is some identifiable cause. there is some identifiable cause. What if only systolic BP or only diastolic BP is elevated? You take the higher reading. You take the higher reading. Group into that stage. Group into that stage. So, for example, if I will give you the example, according to this classification only, suppose a patient is coming to you with a blood pressure of 120 by 86. What is the stage of this patient? This is example. This is the example. So if a patient is coming to you with average 4 readings as 120 by 86, 120 by 86, which stage or which classification you will put this patient into? No, we take the average of all these readings, average of all these readings. So it will be which stage? Will it be elevated BP stage 1 or stage 2? Answer is this is an example of stage 1. Yes, this is an example of stage 1. Stage 1. Very good. Now, coming to the secondary hypertension. Come to the secondary hypertension. So, secondary hypertension, first the renal related causes. Renal related causes. So, number 1 group will be renal causes. Renal causes, mechanism of hypertension. And simultaneously, why these secondary hypertension causes are important? Because if you identify a cause, you treat according to that cause, and blood pressure will be controlled according to that cause. So mechanism of hypertension, renal causes, mechanism of the hypertension, and preferred drug. Preferred drug for controlling that hypertension. So we will make a table of the secondary hypertension causes. So the first cause is renal cause is renoparenchymal. Renoparenchymal. So renoparenchymal, mechanism of hypertension. But first we understand what is the meaning of a renoparenchymal. Renoparenchymal means, example, it is a chronic kidney disease, CKD, chronic kidney disease, or it is glomerulonephritis. It is glomerulonephritis. So this condition, these are the conditions which we call it as the renoparenchymal causes. Renoparenchymal causes, mechanism of hypertension. In these conditions, the GFR is reduced. And if GFR is reduced, volume overload occur. So the mechanism of the hypertension is decreased GFR leads to volume overload. Volume overload, as well as there is a decreased renal blood flow, and when there is a decreased renal blood flow, renin angiotensin system activated. So the second mechanism here will be activation of RAAS. It will be activation of RAAS, renal renin angiotensin aldosterone system. Renal renin angiotensin aldosterone system. So these are the mechanism of the hypertension for renoparenchymal causes. Now the drug that we will give, the preferred drug in this scenario will be, to control the volume overload, we have to give diuretics. We have to give the diuretic, and along with that we have to add, to take care of RAS activation, ACE inhibitor or ARB will be given. Why renal blood flow is less in cases of renoparenchymal disease? It is because of the decreased GFR, or the kidney functions are reduced. So there will be less kidney perfusion, and less blood will go to the renin cells. Less blood will go to the renin cells, so they will get activated. Now come to the number 2 cause. Number 2 renal cause is renovascular. Renovascular. So renovascular cause, for example, renal artery stenosis. For example, renal artery stenosis. So in this case, there is decreased blood to that particular kidney, and renin angiotensin system will be activated. So here activation of renin angiotensin system. That is the predominant mechanism. That is the predominant mechanism, and for this we will give, obviously the preferred drug here will be ACE inhibitors. ACE inhibitors. Drug of choice for essential hypertension, that we will do in the treatment section. How to know which cause patient had, that is a clinical aspect, followed by the investigations. Now the number 3rd renal cause is congenital activating means gain of function of sodium channels of renal tubules. This you have done in your pharmacology as well as the physiology. Sometimes the mutation, activating mutations. So in congenital activating mutation or gain of function of the sodium chloride channel, it is located in DCT. So these channel congenitally, they are working more, and what will happen, they will absorb more sodium, and more sodium is absorbed into the blood, hypertension will be there. So the mechanism is increased sodium reabsorption by renal tubules, by the renal tubules. Liddle syndrome, no, this is not a Liddle syndrome, not a Liddle syndrome. This syndrome is known as, the diagnosis of this syndrome is Gordon syndrome. This is known as the Gordon syndrome, and the treatment of this condition is a very simple treatment. Sodium chloride channel you inhibit by giving diuretic, and these patients respond to thiazides. They will control the blood pressure. They will control the blood pressure here. And the second channel with the same almost the same mechanism is E sodium channel. E sodium channel, this is located in the collecting duct. E stand for epithelial sodium channel. So activating mutation, sodium will be absorbed more. Yes, this is known as Liddle's syndrome. This is known as the Liddle syndrome, and the treatment for Liddle syndrome is, the treatment, yes, amiloride. So it is amiloride. So these inhibit their respective channels. They will inhibit their respective channels. Very good. So three important renal causes we have done: renoparenchymal, renovascular, and the congenital activating mutations of the sodium channels, and there is a question, what will be the treatment drug of choice if it is a bilateral renal artery stenosis? Remember, if it is a bilateral renal artery stenosis, ACE inhibitors are absolutely contraindicated. So in that case, we gave safe agent, calcium channel blocker will be the choice. Now come to the next system of which can lead to the hypertension, So the first system is the renal causes. The second system, an important one, is number 2, is endocrine causes. It is endocrine causes. So if there is some problem with the streaming, so we will take 2 minutes of break for the streaming. All right, so starting with the second system which can lead to secondary hypertension, endocrine causes. So endocrine causes, how can we identify with the clinical information? So here the clinical information will be very important, and for that clinical information you should understand two important basics, and those basics are that systolic BP, this is a concept. The systolic BP is determined by stroke volume. It is determined by the stroke volume. So if stroke volume is increased, systolic BP will increase. This is a basic. While the diastolic BP is determined by peripheral vascular resistance. Mainly the smaller vessels, they determine the peripheral vascular resistance. So what is the uh, concept here, that if stroke volume increase, systolic bp will increase. If the peripheral vascular resistance increase, diastolic bp is increased. But how this peripheral vascular resistance will increase? Peripheral vascular resistance will increase if there is a small vessel constriction, or small vessels are compressed. So that will increase the peripheral vascular resistance. Basic points. So with the help of these two important physiological points, come to the endocrine causes. So endocrine causes we can identify with the help of the type of blood pressure which is elevated, whether it is a systolic BP or a diastolic BP, and presence of edema. So there will be number one cause. So number one cause is identify the type of the blood pressure which is elevated. Here is diastolic BP, and edema is present. And that edema is a non-pitting edema. So these will be the clinical cases. That the diastolic BP is elevated and edema is also present. And that is a non-pitting edema. So in this case, our answer will be, this will be a case of hypothyroidism. With mixed edema. This is a case of hypothyroidism with mixed edema, because what does mixed edema do? Mixed edema compresses the blood vessels in the periphery. So because of the mixed edema, peripheral vessels compressed. And if peripheral vessels are compressed, peripheral vascular resistance increase. And if peripheral vascular resistance increase, diastolic BP increases. Will increase. So this is a case of mixed edema. This is how you identify the cause as hypothyroidism. Now, number two cause. In the number two cause, the main blood pressure which is elevated is systolic BP is elevated. And why systolic BP is elevated? Due to increased stroke volume. Edema is characteristically absent. So it is a predominant elevation of the systolic BP due to increase in stroke volume, that is increase in the cardiac output. So that condition will be, this condition is hyperthyroidism. This is hyperthyroidism. So this case, why hyperthyroidism increases the systolic BP? Reason is physiology. Thyroid hormone increases beta 1 receptor function. Thyroid hormone act on the beta 1 receptor, it increases the beta 1 receptor action, and beta 1 receptor have two functions. One is chronotropic action, second is inotropic action. So when beta 1 receptor function is increased, there will be increase in chronotropic. Chronotropic means heart rate increases, and this feature you will be studying in the endocrine also. Hyperthyroidism, there is a tachycardia. This is the reason. And second function of beta 1 receptor is inotropic, increase inotropic action. Inotropic means contractility increase. Contractility means stroke volume. Stroke volume is increased. So this is how the hyperthyroidism leads to the elevated systolic BP. Elevated systolic BP. Hyperthyroidism. Now come to the number third cause. Number third cause is, in this condition, diastolic BP is increased but without edema. No, elevated BP with no edema, always an endocrine cause? No. We are talking about the endocrine causes, and in those specific causes, the clinical feature we are discussing. The clinical feature we are discussing, but the heading will be endocrine cause. Now, come to the number third cause, endocrine cause. Diastolic BP is high, but edema is absent characteristically. And this is a very, very frequently given question, double Q. Very, very frequently given question. So that condition is aldosterone producing adrenal adenoma. This condition is aldosterone producing adrenal adenoma, and that condition is not pheochromocytoma. That is not a pheochromocytoma. This condition is known as Conn's syndrome. This condition is known as the Conn's syndrome. But why there is a diastolic BP which is high and why there is no edema? We know that aldosterone has a sodium retention property, sodium water retention property, so it should cause the edema. It should cause the edema, but that does not occur. Therefore, this is a favorite question of examiner. Favorite question of examiner. So the reason for this is Conn's syndrome. It has been identified that the culprit hormone is aldosterone. So aldosterone in a long run, it causes fibrosis of blood vessels. Chronically, elevation of aldosterone, it causes the remodeling. It causes the remodeling of heart, remodeling of the blood vessels. It causes the fibrosis of the blood vessel. Fibrosis of the blood vessel, leading to PVR increased. And hence diastolic BP is high. Diastolic BP will be high. Also, because of aldosterone, there is increased ECF volume. Extracellular fluid volume will be increased. Extracellular fluid volume will be increased. And when ECF, extracellular fluid volume, is increased, atria stretch, ANP release, ANP release, atrial natriuretic peptide. And remember, this phenomena occur in cases of high ECF volume. So ANP is released, natriuresis prevent the edema. Natriuresis prevent the edema, and this is known as escape phenomena or escape mechanism, escape from the edema effect of aldosterone. So this is known as natriuresis preventing the edema is known as escape phenomena or escape mechanism. Aldosterone escape. Now come to number 4th cause of endocrine cause of the hypertension, and that is in this condition both the blood pressure are high, systolic BP plus diastolic BP, edema absent. How fibrosis leads is because of the remodeling effect of aldosterone on the cardiovascular system. Now coming to the condition where both systolic BP is high and diastolic BP is high, and that is due to the effect of norepinephrine. That is the effect of norepinephrine. That means pheochromocytoma. And also remember a very important clinical question in the pheochromocytoma. You will be doing this in the surgery, no doubt, but remember in a pheochromocytoma sustained hypertension is more common than against the popular misconception episodic hypertension. Means patient have most of the patients will have a sustained hypertension rather than episodic means ki in between patient is okay and suddenly BP rises, that is episodic. In between patient is okay, so that is less common. Episodic hypertension is less common, sustained hypertension is more common. Now come to the number 3rd cause of secondary hypertension. Remember, we are doing the most important causes which we see clinically commonly. So the number 3rd is miscellaneous causes of secondary hypertension. Miscellaneous causes of the secondary hypertension. So in this condition, very importantly, the diagnosis or etiology have to be made. Clinical features, and mechanism of hypertension. So the drug of choice for the endocrine causes is treat hypothyroidism with thyroid supplements. Hyperthyroidism is say anti-thyroid drugs or surgery. Cons syndrome, we gave the spironolactone, and pheochromocytoma alpha blockers. So these are the respective treatment of these endocrine causes. So now the etiology number one, clinical features. Clinical features of this condition is upper part of body more developed than lower part. So the miscellaneous causes of the secondary hypertension. Miscellaneous causes of the secondary hypertension. So etiology, clinical features, and mechanism of the hypertension. Mechanism of the hypertension. So upper part of the body is more developed than the lower part. So that means upper part is receiving more blood supply than the lower part, and dorsalis pedis is artery is non-palpable. So the etiology here will be coarctation of aorta. Coarctation of the aorta, that is narrowing of the aorta. So the upper part is able to receive the blood supply, but the lower part is not able to receive the blood supply. So that will be a very, very important clinical feature. Dorsalis pedis will be non-palpable. Mechanism of hypertension here is the activation of RAAS. Activation of renin angiotensin aldosterone system. So in this condition, in the coarctation of the aorta, the treatment of choice is basically surgery. So treatment of choice is surgery. With that, patient will improve. Coarctation of aorta. Now the second clinical scenario, number 2, miscellaneous cause. Clinical feature given is daytime sleepiness. Patient has a daytime sleepiness with history of excessive snoring. Which is surgery? Surgery of aorta. They correct the stenosis. Now, daytime sleepiness will be there, and patient relative or spouse will tell that there is a excessive snoring in the patient. So this condition is, yes, obstructive sleep apnea. Obstructive sleep apnea, and because of the obstructive sleep apnea, patient has to wake up in the night frequently. Therefore, patient has daytime sleepiness. Due to frequent, patient has to wake up in the night for the breathing. So there is a stimulation of sympathetic activity. Due to repeated nocturnal awakening. It is also a constituent of metabolic syndrome Y. No, it is a constituent of metabolic syndrome Z. So, what is the treatment of choice here in obstructive sleep apnea that you will be discussing in the respiratory classes as well. So, there is a machine which give a positive pressure. Machine will give a positive pressure, airway remain open. So, that machine is CPAP. CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure. CPAP will be given here. Now, number third, miscellaneous cause, and very important for you as a clinician also, because this you must have also noticed in your relatives or in your household, even with the same dose of antihypertensive, suddenly BP can go up. BP can go up. That is one of the culprit which can increase the blood pressure in a stable patient. Always ask that history, and that history is drugs. Some drugs can cause the high blood pressure. So if a patient is stable and suddenly on the same doses BP is going up, ask the history of drugs, as simple drug as NSAIDs. NSAIDs. But how NSAIDs can, like for a pain, arthritis, patient has taken the painkillers, NSAIDs, and suddenly BP can go up. Reason is NSAID leads to decrease GFR by inhibiting prostaglandins. You must be knowing this physiology. Prostaglandins dilate the afferent arteriole, increase the GFR. So if you inhibit the prostaglandin, GFR will reduce. Volume overload will occur. Volume overload can occur. Now, the next drug with which patient can have hypertension is corticosteroids. Reason, cortisol is the culprit, has mineralocorticoid receptor affinity. Cortisol has a mineralocorticoid receptor affinity, corticosteroids. And of course, if a patient has taken thyroxine overdose, a patient of hypothyroidism, suddenly instead of 50 microgram of thyroxine, patient has taken 100 microgram. So that will increase the blood pressure. Less common but important drug, and this is a drug of abuse which can cause the high blood pressure, and that drug is cocaine use. It stimulates sympathetic activity. It stimulates the sympathetic activity. So these are general secondary hypertension causes, though there can be other causes as well, but they are less common. They are less common in clinical practice. Now come to, after the causes, the clinical features of hypertension. How does the patient present with the hypertension? So come to the clinical features of hypertension after the causes. So the one important symptom, but the exact reason is not known for that symptom, but this is a frequent complaint of the patient, and that is the symptom of early morning occipital headache. Early morning occipital headache, but exact reason is not known. And second important symptom of the hypertension is dyspnea. Reason: hypertension leads to CHF. It leads to CHF. So the thyroxine is because it increases the or stimulate the beta 1 receptor, which we have done earlier. So beta 1 receptor means systolic BP will increase. And in the signs of hypertension, there will be left ventricle hypertrophy, left ventricle becomes stiff. This will be the sign related to the hypertension. First, these two are symptoms, and this is a sign. There will be a ventricle hypertrophy. Ventricle hypertrophy means ventricle becomes stiff. And that we will discuss in the clinical signs. We will get left ventricle S4 heart sound. We'll get a left ventricle S4 heart sounds will be there. Now the investigation will be related to the secondary hypertension that we have done above. And in the investigation, most important investigation that you should remember is the ECG. This is a very important question. ECG findings of hypertension. Systemic hypertension. So it will be how to check the ventricle stiffness. Very good question. Ventricle stiffness is checked by auscultation S4 heart sound. And second one is echocardiography. In the echocardiography, ventricle wall thickness will be seen. Now come to the very important question, and important question is, what are the ECG changes of systemic hypertension? Now it is the time to recall back your ECG classes where systemic hypertension was mentioned as a history. Now we'll recall back here. So in the systemic hypertension, the finding will be left ventricle hypertrophy. Voltage criteria will be present. LVH voltage criteria will be present. And second importantly, left ventricle hypertrophy, pressure will go to the left atria. So there will be left atrial enlargement also. Left atrial enlargement as left ventricle pressure transmitted to left atria. Yes, very good. You can recall back R plus S more than 35. Yes, and importantly, very good, there will be a left axis deviation. there will be a left axis deviation. P mitral will be there. The width of P wave will increase in lead 2. So these will be the ECG findings. These will be the ECG finding. And I am again telling you, most important is the clinical history. Then you make a differential diagnosis. Ki these are your expectations in the ECG. These will be the expectation. LVH will be there, left atrial enlargement will be there, left axis deviation will be there. All these again we will discuss in the ECG questions. Once our myocardial infarction section is over, then we will come to those ECG questions so that your revision will be better. Now come to the treatment of hypertension in journal and what are the guidelines says. Treatment. So treatment is according to the blood pressure readings. According to the blood pressure reading. So blood pressure reading will be elevated BP, stage 1 hypertension, stage 2 hypertension. These are the three BP readings. These are the three BP readings: elevated BP, stage 1 hypertension, stage 2 hypertension. So a patient of elevated BP is coming to us. In that scenario, we will start the patient on lifestyle modifications. Lifestyle modifications. So what are the lifestyle modification? Decrease the sodium intake. So lifestyle modification components are, we will ask the patient to decrease sodium intake. That is very obvious because high sodium consumption increase the blood pressure. Second important thing, we will ask the patient to increase potassium in the diet. So increase potassium intake. Reason being, potassium has been seen from the dietary sources like fruits, banana, they have high potassium. So what this potassium does to the blood vessels, it causes the relaxation of smooth muscles of blood vessels. Low sodium, high potassium. As well as we will try to motivate the patient for exercise. So the third component of the lifestyle modification is the exercise. As exercise leads to increase basal vagal discharge. So this will help in controlling the blood pressure. That will help in controlling the blood pressure. Remember the meaning of basal. Basal means in a resting state. Remember, during exercise there will be increased heart rate, no doubt, but in the resting state, if patient is doing the exercise routinely, so there is a increase in the vagal discharge. So exercise will help. As well as the one diet is DASH diet. One diet is a DASH diet. So DASH diet is dietary approach to stop hypertension. It is more than equal to 150 minutes per week. 150 minutes per week. Amount of sodium, now guideline says less than 1.5 grams per day. 150 minutes per week. Now, dietary approach to hypertension means increase fruits, vegetable and low fat dairy products. And decrease intake of saturated fats. Dietary approach to stop hypertension: increase fruits, vegetable and low fat dairy products so that they supply the potassium in the diet, and decrease the saturated fats. So this question have come in your exam, DASH diet. Now come to the other scenarios where patient is coming to you in a stage 1 or a stage 2 hypertension. So in that scenario, stage 1 hypertension. So the stage 1 hypertension, if a patient has history of coronary artery disease, alcohol in moderate amount, yes, alcohol in moderate quantity will cause the vasodilatation effect. So that can also be the lifestyle modification. So now come to the history of a CAD, stage 1 hypertension. If the history of CAD is absent, lifestyle modifications only. If history of CAD is present, then along with the lifestyle modifications, we give drug. We give the drug. And stage 2 hypertension, straight away, lifestyle modification with drug. So lifestyle modification with drugs. And what is the drug? My advice to you is antihypertensive drug, especially the first line drug, you should read in detail from pharmacology. From the pharmacology, read it in details. Mechanism of action, side effects. So the first line drug are A, B is no longer the first line drug, C, D. So ACE inhibitors or ARB. C stand for calcium channel blockers, D stand for diuretics. So we choose from these first line agents, either ACE inhibitor or ARB. As a practical, some of you are interns or maybe going into internship. Patient comes to you with hypertension. So my advice is you start with a relatively safe agent, ARBs. Telmisartan is the usual preferred ARB that we start the patient with. So you also start with the ARB, less side effects, And B stands for beta blocker. So remember, beta blocker is first line in angina patients with hypertension. Otherwise, they are removed from the first line. So beta blocker are the first line in scenario of angina with hypertension. Angina with the hypertension. So CCB is contraindicated in CAD. Short-acting CCBs are contraindicated in the CAD. When to stop antihypertensive? When patient is going into hypotension, then we stop the antihypertensive drug. So with this, we finish with the topic of the hypertension. So we finish with the class for today. And announcement is, important announcement is, you will be having the continuous class 7 o'clock. Tomorrow there is also a class. So important announcement, tomorrow medicine class at 7 p.m. And in that class we will do myocardial infarction or ischemic heart diseases. Ischemic heart disease and myocardial infarction we will do. And after that we will do the questions related to the ECG. So we finish here. And you will be getting your schedule soon. So you will be given the topics. So tomorrow topic is myocardial infarction. Myocardial infarction. And my advice is, do read coronary artery supply, blood supply from the anatomy for myocardial infarction. Do read that simple and short topic.